"Stop being such a freeloader and get a job," my daughter-in-law Chloe shouted in the middle of our family dinner, pointing her finger right at me. The whole table froze. My son, Ethan, looked like he wanted to disappear. I just smiled calmly. I took a sip of my cheap wine and thought about the $10 million in my tech company. This would be the last dinner she would ever treat me like garbage. I had one mission: to show exactly who the real freeloader in this family was. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories travel. My name is Eleanor, and at 62 years old, I have been living a double life for the last 3 years. After my husband, Arthur, passed away, I decided to conduct a little social experiment with my own family. I dressed in simple, modest clothes. I moved into a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood and let everyone think I had lost everything when Arthur died. The truth was, I was the CEO and founder of Apex Solutions, a software company valued at $10 million. Arthur and I built this empire from scratch, and with his death, everything was left in my name. But nobody knew that, not even my only son, Ethan. Why the charade? Because I wanted to know who truly cared about me when they thought I had nothing left to offer. Who would love me when they believed I was broke? It was a cruel test, perhaps, but a necessary one for someone who spent their entire life surrounded by people who wanted something. In the first few months after the funeral, I was surprised by how quickly the phone stopped ringing. The old friends from the country club disappeared. The distant relatives who always showed up for Sunday dinners stopped visiting. I was prepared for that. What I didn't expect was the transformation of Chloe, Ethan's wife of 5 years. For the first few months, she was attentive. She brought me casseroles occasionally. She asked if I needed anything. But as soon as she realized I wouldn't be sharing a multi-million-dollar inheritance, the mask slipped. Ethan and Chloe's visits became rarer. When I did go to their house, I noticed the annoyed glances from Chloe every time I mentioned any financial difficulty. The birthday gifts became cheaper and more impersonal. And the comments? Oh, the comments. "Eleanor, that sweater looks so worn out. Don't you have anything better to wear? You should get your hair cut at that cheaper salon on the corner. Why don't you just sell that last bit of jewelry you have left and pay your bills?" I swallowed every veiled insult, every condescending suggestion. I watched and took mental notes, silently building the case against her. That night, the night of Ethan's birthday dinner, things reached their limit. It was a simple dinner at their house. Chloe had prepared her special lasagna, which was actually just a frozen Stouffer's bought from the supermarket. I recognized the taste. I was sitting at the table with Ethan, Chloe, and her parents, the Millers, a pretentious couple who always made sure to mention their summer in Europe or their new German car. The conversation revolved around Chloe's success with her little home goods boutique at the high-end mall, which was funded entirely by Ethan's salary as a marketing manager. She talked as if she had built an empire all by herself. "And I'm thinking of opening a second location next year," Chloe said, pouring herself more wine. "Business is really taking off." "That's wonderful, dear," I commented, genuinely happy for her success, despite everything. "Well, that's what happens when you work hard instead of waiting for others to solve your problems," she replied, looking directly at me. Ethan choked on his drink. "Chloe, please." "What?" "Everyone is thinking it," Chloe continued. "Your mother has been living in that tiny apartment in that gentrifying neighborhood for 3 years, complaining about how hard it is to pay the bills, and she hasn't done a single thing to improve her situation." "My situation is complicated, Chloe," I replied calmly. "Complicated? For God's sake, you're 62, not 92. Half the people your age are still working. You could get a job anywhere, a retail clerk, a receptionist, whatever." The silence at the table was heavy. The Millers looked uncomfortable but said nothing to defend me. Ethan stared intently at his plate, just as he always did when his wife attacked me. "Maybe you're right," I replied softly. "Maybe I should be more proactive." "Proactive? You should stop being a freeloader and get a job, or get out of our lives." It was then that something inside me snapped. 3 years of watching this woman treat me like a burden, an embarrassment, a problem to be solved. 3 years of watching my son, a man I raised to be strong and principled, become a submissive shadow next to this manipulative woman. I placed my fork calmly next to my plate, folded my napkin, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the same smile I gave my competitors right before I destroyed them in a negotiation. "Chloe," I said slowly, "you really have no idea who I am, do you?" She rolled her eyes. "A dramatic widow who refuses to move on and prefers to be a burden to her own son." "No, dear. I'm someone you really shouldn't have made an enemy of." "Is that a threat?" "No, it's a promise." I stood up from the table. "Ethan, thank you for dinner. I'll call you tomorrow. We have a lot to talk about." I walked out calmly, leaving them to deal with the uncomfortable silence that followed. As I walked back to my small apartment, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. The charade was about to end, and the real Eleanor was ready to return. At home, I took off my modest clothes and put on one of the many designer suits I kept hidden in a secret compartment in the closet. I sat at my small table, turned on my laptop, and accessed the bank accounts and financial reports I had been religiously reviewing every night, far from everyone's eyes. Apex Solutions wasn't just successful, it was thriving. Under my remote and discreet direction, our stock had risen 30% in the last year. Our new security software had been bought by 3 Fortune 500 companies. We had offices in 4 countries. And all of this was about to become Chloe's worst nightmare. I took a sip of real wine, not the cheap stuff I drank at her house, but an expensive bottle from Napa Valley I kept for special occasions. This was definitely a special occasion, the beginning of the end of Chloe's reign of terror over my life and my son's. I picked up my phone and sent a message to my executive assistant, who had kept my identity secret for 3 years. "Michael, it's time. Put the plan in motion." He replied immediately. "Understood. Everything is ready for tomorrow morning." I smiled, thinking of the shock Chloe would have when she discovered the truth. When she realized that the freeloader she despised so much was, in fact, one of the most powerful women in the tech industry. But first, I needed to have an honest conversation with my son. A conversation 3 years overdue. The call came at 7:30 the next morning, exactly as I had planned. Ethan sounded nervous. His voice was trembling on the other end of the line. "Mom, we need to talk. About last night." "Yes, we do," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "But not over the phone. Let's meet for breakfast." "Alone?" There was a pause. I could almost hear his hesitation, probably worried about what Chloe would say. It broke my heart a little more. "Sure," he finally agreed. "The coffee shop on the corner by your apartment in half an hour?" "No," I said firmly. "Meet me at the Street Regis in 1 hour." "The Street? Regis? That 5-star hotel? Mom, that place is incredibly expensive. My treat, and dress well. It's important." I hung up before he could protest. Then I called Michael. "Is everything ready in the conference room?" "Yes, Mrs. Pierce. The documents are in the blue folder. As you requested. Mr. Wallace will arrive at 9:30. "Excellent. And the breakfast reservation?" "The most discreet table in the restaurant, as you asked." "Perfect." I dressed with care that morning. None of the faded cardigans or polyester pants I had worn for the last 3 years. Instead, I chose a navy blue silk suit, Italian leather shoes, and the pearls Arthur had given me for our 30th wedding anniversary. I did my makeup carefully. I styled my gray hair into an elegant chignon. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the frail widow I had been playing for so long. I saw the woman I always was, determined, powerful, a force to be reckoned with. I arrived at the Street, Regis 15 minutes early. The concierge recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Pierce, what a pleasure to see you again. It's been a while." "Thank you, Santiago. It's good to be back." I headed to the restaurant, where I was greeted by the maitre d' with the same deference. I sat at the reserved table, overlooking the gardens, and ordered a coffee. Ethan arrived promptly, wearing his only good suit, the one he bought for his father's funeral. I could see the surprise on his face as he entered the elegant restaurant and was guided to my table. His eyes widened even more when he saw me. "Mom, you look different." "Sit down, Ethan," I said, motioning to the chair across from me. He obeyed, visibly confused. "What's going on? Why are we here? And how did you, those clothes?" Ethan, I interrupted gently. What do you know about the work your father and I did? He frowned. The question clearly caught him off guard. Well, Dad was an executive at some tech company. You were a consultant, right? Something with software. I smiled sadly. It was exactly what we had wanted him to think. Arthur and I always kept our professional lives separate from our personal ones. We didn't want Ethan growing up as the millionaire's kid. We wanted him to build his own path. Not exactly, I replied. Your father and I founded Apex Solutions 35 years ago. We started it in our garage, remember? You used to play under the table while we worked on those first lines of code. Ethan nodded slowly, the memory returning. I remember vaguely, but I thought you sold that little company years ago. No, son. We turned it into a $10 million corporation with over 200 employees in 4 countries. The fork he was holding clattered onto his plate. His eyes, so much like his father's, were wide with shock. What? But when Dad died, you moved into that tiny apartment. Your clothes. You said we barely had any money. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling the weight of 3 years of lies between us. I never said that exactly. I let you assume it. And you, along with Chloe, assumed it. He turned pale at the mention of his wife's name. Chloe doesn't know? No. Nobody knows. Except for a very small circle of trusted executives. Why, Mom? Why this whole charade? I put my cup down on the saucer and looked my son directly in the eyes. Because I wanted to know who truly loved me, Ethan. Who would stand by me when they thought I had nothing left to offer? The pain in his eyes was palpable. You were testing us? Yes, I admitted softly. After your father died, I realized how much of our social life was based on our status and money. People sought us out because we were useful, not because they loved us. I needed to know who would stay when all of that disappeared. Ethan looked away, and I could see the shame on his face. He knew he had failed the test, not completely, but enough for it to hurt. And Chloe? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I took a deep breath. This was the hard part. Ethan, after last night's dinner, I'm afraid I no longer have any doubts about your wife. She sees me as a burden, an embarrassment. This has been clear over the last 3 years. But last night, she finally showed her true colors in front of everyone. Tears welled up in his eyes. She's not always like that, Mom. She's under a lot of pressure with the store, with the debts. Debts? I interrupted. What debts, Ethan? He hesitated. Then he let out a slow breath. We're in trouble. The store isn't doing as well as she makes it seem. We have credit card debt, the loan for the store. We're not drowning, but it's getting hard. This explained a lot. Chloe's growing hostility, the frustration directed at me. She probably thought she had married a man whose parents would leave him a substantial inheritance, and instead, she ended up with a husband on a modest salary and an apparently destitute mother-in-law. Ethan, there's something else you need to know. What? He asked, clearly apprehensive. After your father died, I made a decision. I made you the beneficiary of 30% of the company's shares in my will, but with one condition. What condition? That you would never know about it while I was alive, unless I determined it was time for you to know. His eyes widened. And you've decided now is the time. Yes. The documents are in a conference room here at the hotel. My lawyer will be here soon to explain everything. He looked stunned, trying to process it all. So, this whole time, you didn't need our help? You're rich? Very, son. And I think it's time everyone knew it. His eyes met mine, filled with confusion, sadness, and maybe a little anger. What are you going to do? That depends on you, Ethan. What do you want me to do? Continue the charade? Reveal everything? What part of this is most important to you? He was silent for a long moment, stirring the food on his plate. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but firm. I want the truth. All of it. Not just for me, or for Chloe, but for everyone. I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and relief. My son still had the backbone Arthur and I tried to instill in him. Then that's what we'll do. But first, we need to discuss your situation with Chloe. What do you mean? We need to be clear on one thing. The company shares I'm transferring to you are not to save your wife's failing business or to pay off debts racked up by reckless decisions. I saw a flash of irritation in his eyes, followed by resignation. He knew I was right. I understand. Perfect. Now, let's go upstairs. The lawyer should be arriving, and we have a lot to discuss about your future, and the future of your marriage. I picked up my purse and stood, feeling the strength of the woman I truly was, flowing back through my veins. The charade was over. It was time for Eleanor Pierce to return to the world, and Chloe had no idea what was coming. The meeting with Mr. Wallace was eye-opening for Ethan. For 2 hours, the lawyer, my personal and corporate attorney for over 20 years, meticulously detailed the extent of the empire Arthur and I had built. Ethan remained silent most of the time, nodding occasionally, his eyes scanning the documents in front of him. Financial reports, stock holdings, properties, patents, a lifetime of his parents' work laid out in staggering numbers. So, Mr. Wallace said, finally closing his folder, the shares have been officially transferred to your name, Mr. Pierce. As of now, you are the owner of 30% of Apex Solutions, making you a minority shareholder, but a very wealthy man nonetheless. Ethan swallowed hard, looking at me. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet, I replied. There's more. I asked Mr. Wallace to leave us alone. As soon as the door closed, I opened my purse and took out another set of documents. What's this? Ethan asked. Reports from a private investigator I hired 2 years ago. He frowned. You hired someone to investigate me? Not you, I replied, pushing the papers toward him. Chloe. His expression hardened. Why would you do that? Because I needed to be sure of who she really was before I trusted her with any part of our family legacy. Ethan hesitated, his hands hovering over the documents. I noted his conflict, torn between loyalty to his wife and curiosity about what I had found. I won't force you to read it, son, but I think you should know who you're married to, especially now that you have so much at stake. He finally pulled the papers closer and began to read. I watched his face as he absorbed the information. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally something that looked like deep anguish. This can't be true, he muttered. It's all documented, with photographic evidence and sworn statements, all verifiable. What Ethan was reading was Chloe's complete history before she met him. Her 2 previous marriages, both to men of means, her history of debts left behind. Her real name, not Chloe Miller, but Jenna Kowalski, legally changed after her first divorce. The parents at dinner last night were, in fact, hired actors meant to bolster her fake, affluent background. But the worst part was the proof of her current infidelity. Photos of her entering the Crossroads Motel with Javier Morales, the partner in the boutique she was so proud of. The same Javier, who often had dinner at their house, introduced as just a colleague. Why would she do this? Ethan asked, his voice choked. We didn't have that much money. But she thought you would someday, I explained gently. She did her research before she met you. She knew about Apex Solutions, about your father and me. She likely assumed you would inherit everything. When your father died and I became poor, it ruined her plans. But she was already too deep in. The marriage, the store you helped finance. So she stayed, hoping maybe there was still some money hidden somewhere. Ethan pushed the papers away, as if the physical contact hurt him. So now what? What do we do now? That's up to you, son. Do you still love her, knowing all this? He closed his eyes, running his hands over his face. When he opened them again, I saw a resolve that reminded me so much of his father, it almost hurt. No, I don't love the person in those documents. Maybe I never really loved her. Just the idea of what I thought she was. I nodded, understanding completely. Then I think it's time to confront her with the truth. All of it. Ethan nodded slowly. But how? At that, I smiled the confident smile of a CEO used to solving complex problems. I have a plan. 3 hours later, we were parking in front of Ethan's house. The house I had helped them buy as a wedding gift, though he thought he had gotten the loan on his own merit. He had called Chloe, telling her they needed to talk about her behavior last night. She agreed, probably expecting him to bring his problematic mother over to apologize. Little did she know she was about to face not the frail widow she thought she knew, but Eleanor Pierce in all her glory, multimillionaire CEO, and now a very, very angry mother-in-law. I walked into that house as a completely different person than the one Chloe was used to seeing. My impeccable suit, upright posture, confidence radiating with every step. I could see the shock in her eyes as soon as I crossed the threshold. "Eleanor? What? What happened to you?" she asked, her eyes raking over my transformed appearance. "What happened is that I'm tired of lying, Chloe. Or should I call you Jenna?" Her face instantly went pale. Ethan walked in right behind me, carrying the folder with the documents. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, looking nervously from me to Ethan. "Why don't we sit down?" I suggested, motioning to the living room. "We have a lot to discuss." She followed us hesitantly, perching on the edge of the sofa like an animal ready to flee at the first sign of danger. "Chloe," I began, settling comfortably into the armchair as if I owned the place, which technically I did, since I had paid for it. "Do you remember what you said to me last night? About me being a freeloader who needs to get a job?" She swallowed hard. "Look, about that." I was stressed. I had too much to drink. No, I interrupted calmly. "You were honest for the first time. You said exactly what you think of me, and I appreciate honesty, I really do. That's why I decided to return the favor." Ethan opened the folder and began laying documents out on the coffee table. "What is that?" Chloe asked, her tone now wary. "This," I replied, "is the story of my life. Or at least, the part you don't know." I picked up the first document, a copy of the cover of Forbes magazine, featuring my picture and the headline, "The Invisible Queen of Software Security." That's me, 5 years ago. I was on the list of the 50 most powerful women in business. I pushed another document toward her. "And this is the current financial statement for Apex Solutions, the company I founded with Arthur 35 years ago, and which is now worth over $10 million. Chloe picked up the papers with trembling hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. That can't be true. You live in that tiny apartment. You wear second-hand clothes. You don't have a car. All part of a social experiment, let's say. I wanted to see who really cared about me, not my money or status." I leaned forward. "You failed that test spectacularly, I must say." She looked at Ethan, searching for some kind of denial, some sign that this was a cruel joke. He just stared back, his face a mask of disappointment. "Ethan, you knew about this?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "I just found out this morning," he replied coolly. "But that's not all I found out." He pushed the other set of documents toward her, the private investigator's reports. Chloe looked at the first page and turned even paler. "This is an invasion of privacy," she exclaimed, trying to muster some indignation. "Not when it's a legitimate investigation to verify fraud," I replied calmly. "Fraud? Like pretending to be Chloe Miller from a wealthy family when you're really Jenna Kowalski from Newark. Fraud, like hiring actors to play your parents. Fraud, like hiding 2 previous marriages and the debts you left behind." She jumped up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do," Ethan said, his voice firmer than I had heard it in years. "You have to listen to this, and you have to explain it, especially the pictures with Javier." Chloe's face went from pale to red in seconds. "You're spying on me now? Following me?" "It didn't take much effort," I replied. "You weren't exactly discreet." "The Crossroads Motel, every Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Really, Chloe? You could have at least mixed it up a bit." She collapsed back onto the sofa, suddenly looking much smaller. "What do you want? Money?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "I just found out I own 30% of a $10 million company. I don't think I need your money." "Then it's revenge?" she asked, looking at me. "You planned all this to humiliate me?" "No," I answered honestly. "I planned this to protect my son and the legacy Arthur and I built. You were just an unforeseen obstacle." Ethan leaned forward, looking her dead in the eyes. "I want a divorce, Chloe, immediately, and I want you out of this house today." "You can't just throw me out," she protested. "I have rights." I cleared my throat gently. "Actually, the house is in my name. You were a guest here, technically speaking. A guest who is no longer welcome." She looked from one of us to the other, the realization finally sinking in. She was cornered. "And the store?" she asked, her voice small. "It's all I have. It's all you have because it's all you managed to squeeze out of me," Ethan replied. "But you can keep it. I'll transfer my share to you. Consider it an early divorce settlement. But only if you leave today and agree to an uncontested divorce." Chloe stood up again, this time more slowly. The calculation was visible in her eyes, weighing her options, cutting her losses. Finally, she gave a stiff nod. "I need a few hours to pack." "You have one," I replied. "We'll be here to make sure you only take what's yours." She shot me a look of pure hatred before heading upstairs, her heavy footsteps echoing through the house. Ethan and I sat in silence until we heard the bedroom door slam. An hour later, Chloe came down the stairs dragging 2 large suitcases. Her face was tear-streaked, but her eyes burned with rage. Ethan and I stood in the living room, silently witnessing her departure. "You're going to regret this," she said, looking directly at me. "Nobody likes being lied to." "Interesting observation," I replied calmly, coming from someone who built their entire life on lies. She turned to Ethan. 3 years, Ethan. 3 years together. And you choose your lying mother over me?" Ethan stood up slowly. I could see the pain in his face, but also the resolve. "I'm not choosing between you and my mother, Chloe. I'm choosing the truth. And the truth is, you never loved me. Only what you thought I could give you." She laughed bitterly. "And what did you give me? A failing store and a mediocre life with a pathetic mother-in-law. I should have listened to my gut when I found out your parents were just regular executives, not the millionaires I was hoping for." "There's the irony," I remarked. "We were exactly what you were looking for. You just weren't smart enough to see past the facade." Chloe grabbed her suitcases and walked to the door. On the threshold, she turned one last time. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," I replied, standing up to join my son. "And remember, Chloe, unlike you, I have the resources to make sure you never come near our family again. One call from me, and you'll find out just how small the world can be when you have the right connections." The door slammed shut, and she was finally gone. Ethan slumped onto the sofa, covering his face with his hands. "You're right, you know," he said quietly. "You lied to me for 3 years." I sat down next to him, giving him space but close enough to show support. "Yes, I did. And a part of me will always regret that. But you lied to me, too, Ethan." He lifted his head, confused. "How?" "You pretended not to see how she treated me. You pretended everything was fine, when it clearly wasn't. You allowed her to belittle me repeatedly without ever mounting a real defense. It was harsh, but it was necessary. Right now, we weren't just mother and son. We were 2 people who had hurt each other and needed to deal with the fallout." "You're right," he admitted, after a long silence. "I should have defended you. I should have asked more questions, looked closer." "I'm so sorry, Mom." "I'm sorry too, son." I took his hand in mine. "So, where does this leave us?" He took a deep breath. "Honestly, I don't know. I need time to process all of this. My marriage is over. I just found out I'm a millionaire, and my mother is actually a powerful CEO who's been testing me for 3 years. It's a lot." I nodded, understanding completely. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." I stood up to leave, but he held on to my hand. "Are you going back to that little apartment?" I smiled slightly. "No, son. That chapter is over. It's time for Eleanor Pierce to return to the world." That night, I returned to my real home, the penthouse overlooking the city that had been my secret refuge for 3 years. As I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out at the city lights, my phone rang. It was Michael, my assistant. "Mrs. Pierce, how did the meeting go?" "Exactly as we expected," I replied. "Chloe is out of Ethan's life. He knows everything now. And how did he react?" I sighed. "He's processing. He needs time. Understandable. And the office? Are you ready to return officially?" I took a sip of wine, contemplating the question. For 3 years, I had run Apex Solutions remotely, joining meetings by video conference, making strategic decisions under the radar, keeping my true identity hidden from even the newest employees. Yes, I decided. It's time for Eleanor Pierce to rise from the ashes. The next morning, I dressed like the executive I always was. Impeccable black suit, discreet but elegant heels, professional makeup. When I walked into the Apex Solutions building for the first time in 3 years, I could feel the stares of surprise and confusion. The receptionist, a young woman who had been hired during my absence, looked at me hesitantly. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I smiled. "Eleanor Pierce to see Michael Bennett, please." Her eyes widened. "Eleanor Pierce? The founder?" "The very same." She quickly picked up the phone, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Bennett, Eleanor Pierce is in the lobby to see you." "Yes, sir. Right away." In less than a minute, Michael appeared in the lobby, his face lit up with a genuine smile. "Eleanor, welcome back." He hugged me briefly. A break in protocol that showed the depth of our professional friendship. Then he offered me his arm. "Ready to cause a stir?" "More than ready," I replied. As we walked through the corridors, employees stopped to stare. Some of the older ones recognized me immediately, their faces reflecting shock and then joy. The newer ones looked confused, probably trying to understand why a stranger was causing such a commotion. Michael led me directly to the main conference room, where I knew the executive board would be gathered for their weekly meeting. When we opened the doors, the conversation stopped abruptly. 10 faces turned in our direction, some familiar, others new. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael announced with obvious pride, "allow me to reintroduce Eleanor Pierce, founder and CEO of Apex Solutions." The silence was deafening for a moment, followed by an explosion of voices and chairs scraping as people stood to greet me. Roberto Chen, our CFO for 15 years, was the first to approach me. "Eleanor, my goodness, you're back. Michael told us you'd be back eventually, but after so long." Sarah Jenkins, head of operations and one of the few who knew the truth, smiled discreetly. "Welcome back, boss. We missed you." For nearly an hour, I was reintroduced to my own company, meeting new executives, reconnecting with old colleagues, hearing enthusiastic updates on projects I had been secretly tracking for years. Finally, Michael clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "I believe we have a meeting to continue, and Mrs. Pierce has many updates to receive. Shall we all sit?" I took my place at the head of the table, the chair that had remained symbolically empty during my absence. Michael had prepared me well. I knew every detail of the current operations, but I pretended to be learning some things for the first time. 2 hours later, when the meeting ended, I stayed in the room with Michael and Sarah, the only ones who knew the whole truth. "How does it feel to be back?" Sarah asked. "Like I never really left," I answered honestly. "I followed everything so closely that sometimes I forget I wasn't physically present." Michael poured us coffee. "And Ethan? How is he handling everything?" "He needs space, as we expected, but he'll be fine. He's Arthur's son. He has more strength than he realizes." "And what about Chloe?" Sarah asked, her voice hardening at the name. Sarah had helped me investigate Chloe's past and knew the full extent of her manipulation. "Out of our lives, I hope. But something tells me we haven't seen the last of her yet." I took a sip of my coffee thoughtfully. "People like Chloe don't accept defeat easily." "Are you worried?" Michael asked. "Not worried. Prepared." Chloe's response came faster than I expected. The next morning, as I was having coffee in my penthouse, I received a call from Ethan. "Mom, did you see social media today?" "No, dear. What happened?" "Chloe, she's... Well, I think you should just see for yourself." I opened my laptop and quickly found Chloe's profile. There it was, in large letters. The truth about Eleanor Pierce. How a manipulative CEO deceived her own family for years. Below it, a long text detailing her distorted version of the story. How I had abandoned my son after his father's death. How I had faked poverty to test people's loyalty. How I had destroyed her marriage out of pure malice. The post already had hundreds of shares. "Ethan," I said calmly, "don't worry about it." "Not worry? Mom? She's publicly slandering you. And you think I didn't see this coming?" I smiled, though he couldn't see me. "Remember when I said people like Chloe don't accept defeat easily? I was counting on it." "What do you mean?" "I mean Michael is already in contact with our legal department. Defamation is a crime, son, and Chloe just exposed herself publicly. But people are going to believe her. Some might, for a little while, but the truth has a way of prevailing. I hung up and immediately called Michael. Within an hour, the public relations machine of Apex Solutions was in motion. An official statement was released confirming my return to the company's leadership after a sabbatical period to deal with the grief of losing my husband. Interviews were scheduled with respected business journalists. The true story, or at least the version we chose to share, was being carefully disseminated. At the same time, our lawyers sent a formal letter to Chloe, demanding an immediate retraction of her defamatory claims and threatening legal action if she continued. Her response was to delete the original post, only to replace it with another, more cautious in its accusations, but just as venomous in its tone. "She's not going to stop," Sarah commented when we met in my office to discuss the situation. "She's been publicly humiliated and lost everything she built on lies. Revenge is all she has left. Then we'll take that away from her, too," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "It's time for Plan B." Plan B was not something I had planned to use. It was aggressive, relentless, and would work best as a last resort. But Chloe had escalated the situation to a level that required a definitive response. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" Michael asked, looking concerned. "Once we start this, we can't go back. I'm sure," I replied. She had her chance to leave quietly. Now she's going to find out why Arthur used to call me the Ice Queen in negotiations. Michael nodded, understanding the reference. During the years of Apex Solutions' rise, I had developed a reputation in business circles. The woman whose expression never faltered during tough negotiations, who never showed her hand, and who always won. "I'll make the calls," he said, standing up to leave. "One more thing, Michael," I called out, pausing him at the door. "Inform Ethan first. He needs to be prepared for what's about to happen." "Of course." I met Ethan that night at the Street Regis restaurant, now our unofficial meeting spot. He looked better than at our last encounter, calmer, more centered, though I could see he still carried the weight of the betrayal. "Mom," he greeted me with a hug, something that hadn't happened in a long time. "You look stunning." I smiled, discreetly adjusting the sapphire brooch that complemented my navy blue suit. "Thank you, dear. It's good to be myself again." We sat and ordered, the conversation flowing naturally about trivial matters. The weather, the restaurant, small updates about his work. Only when our main courses were served did I broach the real reason for our meeting. "Ethan, I called you here tonight because I need to warn you about something that's going to happen tomorrow." He stopped eating, placing his fork carefully on the plate. "This is about Chloe, isn't it?" "Yes. Her social media posts are continuing, despite the legal warnings. She's given interviews to 2 local gossip blogs, making increasingly absurd accusations." Ethan sighed. "I saw. She's saying you manipulated me with money to turn me against her. That this whole private investigator story was fabricated." "Exactly. And things are going to get worse before they get better." "What do you mean?" I took a sip of water, choosing my words carefully. "Tomorrow, several media outlets will receive information about Chloe. Her real history, her previous marriages, the debts, the frauds. You're going to expose her publicly?" There was a note of concern in his voice. "Not directly. The information will come from seemingly unrelated sources. Ex-husbands who finally decided to speak out, creditors looking for unpaid debts, people she wronged over the years, all coming forward at once." Ethan frowned. "That sounds calculated. And it is. Do you think I'm the only person she's ever deceived, Ethan? I've been in contact with her other victims for years, people who, like us, were manipulated by Chloe, or Jenna as she was known then. How long have you been planning this?" "Since I first became suspicious of her, about 2 years ago, but I always hoped I wouldn't need to use this strategy. I gave her a chance to walk away from our lives in peace." Ethan was silent for a long moment, absorbing my words. Finally, he spoke. "Won't this completely destroy her?" "Probably," I admitted. "But the alternative is to let her continue spreading lies about us, about the company, about our family legacy. Are you willing to live with that?" He looked out the restaurant window, at the city lights. "No," he said finally. "I'm not. She made her choice. Now she has to live with the consequences. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride. Ethan was finally breaking free from Chloe's influence, finding his own strength. Maybe my son was more like Arthur and me than I had realized. There's one more thing you should know, I added. I've hired security for you, just as a precaution. Do you think she'd be a physical danger? Not directly, but desperate people sometimes do desperate things. I'd rather not take any chances. He nodded, understanding. And you? Will you have security too? Dear, I smiled. I've had security ever since your father died. You just never noticed. The next morning, the storm began. As planned, several media outlets ran stories about the real Chloe Miller, revealing her past as Jenna Kowalski, detailing her previous marriages to wealthy men, exposing her debts and frauds. Ex-husbands gave interviews, describing how they had been manipulated and abandoned as soon as their money ran out. Former employers reported on embezzlement schemes. Even the actors she had hired to play her parents came forward, apparently motivated by remorse. Ethan's phone didn't stop ringing. Friends, colleagues, all wanting to know if the news was true. My phone, on the other hand, remained relatively quiet. Only the calls I expected to receive from Michael and Sarah, confirming that everything was proceeding as planned. Around noon, Chloe finally called me. I was in my office at Apex Solutions, reviewing some contracts, when my assistant announced the call, Eleanor Pierce speaking. I answered, my voice professional and neutral. You manipulative bitch. Chloe's voice was shaking with rage. You did this, didn't you? You orchestrated all of this. Chloe, I'm in the middle of an important meeting. Could you clarify what exactly you're accusing me of? Don't play dumb with me. The news, the interviews, everyone suddenly talking about my past. This has your name written all over it. I paused deliberately. An interesting theory. Do you have any proof to back it up? Or is this just another one of your baseless accusations, like the ones you've been spreading about me on social media? You're going to pay for this, she hissed. I'm going to what exactly? I interrupted, my voice finally hardening. Continue to slander me? Spread more lies about my family? Or perhaps you're planning something more drastic? What? Chloe, let me be very clear. You are being monitored. Every move, every communication. I have a top-tier security team protecting my family and my company. And I have the best lawyers in the country ready to respond to any further attempts by you to harm us. Silence on the other end of the line. Now, I'm going to make you an offer, and I suggest you consider it very seriously. Stop the public attacks. Accept the divorce without contest. Walk out of our lives forever. In return, I will make the necessary calls to have the stories about you gradually disappear from the news cycle. You can do that? Believe me, I can do much more than that. So, what's it going to be, Chloe? War or peace? Another long silence, then a defeated sigh. Peace. Excellent choice. My lawyers will be in touch today with the terms of the agreement. And Chloe? If you break this agreement, what you saw today will be just the beginning. I hung up without waiting for a reply. For a moment, I let myself feel the weight of the battle. The exhaustion, the regret that it had come to this, the sadness for what my son had lost. But only for a moment. Then I called Ethan. It's done, I informed him. She agreed to the terms. That easily? The surprise was evident in his voice. People like Chloe are only brave as long as they think they have the upper hand. When they realize they're truly outmatched, they back down quickly. So, it's over? Really? I believe so, I replied. Though I'll keep the security detail on for now, just as a precaution. Thank you, Mom, he said, his voice lighter than I had heard it in weeks. Not just for handling this, but for saving me from her. Always, dear, always. In the following days, the headlines about Chloe gradually subsided, replaced by other stories, other scandals. As promised, I made a few strategic calls, asking for certain articles to be archived, for certain interviews not to be rebroadcast. I didn't completely erase her public disgrace. That would be impossible in the digital age. But I reduced the impact to a manageable level. Chloe kept her part of the bargain. She signed the divorce papers without contest, accepting the generous terms Ethan offered, keeping the boutique and a small alimony for 1 year to re-establish herself. In return, she relinquished all future claims on his assets and agreed to a mutual restraining order. A week after everything was settled, Ethan invited me to dinner at his apartment, a new place he had rented, completely different from the house he had shared with Chloe. It was smaller, simpler, but somehow cozier. "I'm starting over," he explained as he poured me wine into glasses I recognized as part of the set Arthur and I had given him for his 30th birthday. "New house, new memories." "I'm happy for you," I replied sincerely. "I'm still processing everything," he continued, sitting across from me. "The last 3 years, the money, the company. Chloe. It will take time," I agreed. "Betrayal isn't something you get over overnight." "It's not just her betrayal," he said, his eyes meeting mine directly. "It's also what you did." I set my glass down, bracing for a conversation I knew we needed to have. "I know I hurt you, Ethan. It was never my intention, but it happened nonetheless, and I am truly sorry for that. Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning?" I sighed deeply, thinking of how to explain the complexities of my decision. "After your father died, I was lost. Not just without my partner in life and business, but without my moral compass. Arthur was always the one who knew instinctively who to trust. I was the strategist, he was the judge of character." Ethan nodded, remembering his father. When he was gone, I realized how much I had become dependent on that gift of his. And then, when I started seeing how people around me changed their attitudes toward me, friends who suddenly had perfect investments to offer, distant relatives who suddenly needed loans, I became paranoid. I started to doubt everyone. "Even me," he completed. "Especially you," I admitted. "Not because I doubted your love, but because I knew you always saw the best in people, even those who didn't deserve it. And I was afraid someone like Chloe could exploit that quality." "And I proved your fears right," he said bitterly. "No, Ethan. You proved you're your father's son, generous, loving, always willing to give people a chance. That's not a flaw. It's a strength. The world needs more people like you." He smiled slightly, touched by my words. "My mistake," I continued, "was not trusting you enough to share my concerns. We should have faced this together, as a family. Instead, I created this elaborate test, this charade, and I ended up hurting the one person I wanted most to protect." Ethan stood up and came to sit next to me on the sofa. For the first time in years, I felt like we were truly reconnecting. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "How do we move forward?" With honesty, I replied simply, "No more secrets, no more tests, just a mother and son navigating this new chapter together." He took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I like that." We talked for hours that night, about the past, about the future, about his plans for the company, about how he felt about his newfound wealth. It was the most genuine conversation we'd had in years, with no barriers, no characters to play. When I finally said goodbye, he hugged me at the door. A strong, sincere hug that reminded me of when he was little, and he would hold on to me like I was his whole world. "I know that what you did, however complicated, came from a place of love," he said. "And that's what matters in the end." With tears in my eyes, I hugged him back. "Thank you for giving me a second chance, son. We're giving each other a second chance, Mom. Both of us." 6 months passed since the confrontation with Chloe. Life took on a new rhythm, more authentic, more rewarding than I could have imagined. Apex Solutions thrived under my renewed leadership. My return had been celebrated not just internally, but across the tech industry. New clients emerged, drawn by the story of the CEO who returned from the shadows. The company's stock rose 40% in just 3 months. Ethan, too, found his place in the company, not as a reluctant heir, but as someone determined to learn the business from the ground up. Despite owning 30% of the shares, he insisted on starting in a junior position in the marketing department, working side by side with the other employees. "I want to earn my place here," he explained when I questioned his decision. "I don't want to just be the founder's son. I want to be someone who actually contributes to the company's success." His commitment and work ethic soon earned him the respect of his colleagues. In just 6 months, he was promoted twice, rising to the position of digital campaign manager. A genuine achievement, not a family favor. As for Chloe, she kept her word, at least as far as we knew. There were no more social media posts, no interviews, no attempts at contact. According to our informants, she had sold the boutique and moved to another state, likely to escape the public shame that, despite our efforts to mitigate, still followed her like a shadow. My relationship with Ethan deepened, becoming more honest and stronger than it had ever been. We had dinner together weekly, sometimes at fancy restaurants, sometimes at little bistros we discovered together, sometimes at home, cooking the recipes Arthur loved. On one of those evenings, as we were enjoying a home-cooked meal in my penthouse, Ethan brought up an unexpected topic. "I met someone," he said, a slight blush coloring his cheeks. I put my fork down, giving him my full attention. "Really? Tell me about her?" "It's a him, actually," Ethan corrected, looking slightly nervous. "His name is Daniel. He's a history professor at the State University." For a moment, I was surprised not by the revelation that my son was interested in a man, but because he had never mentioned that possibility before. "Ethan, that's wonderful," I replied sincerely. "How did you meet?" He visibly relaxed, perhaps relieved by my positive reaction. At a lecture he gave at the public library on the history of technology. We got to talking afterward, found out we have a lot in common. "And how long have you been seeing each other?" "About a month." He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. He doesn't know about Apex Solutions, about the money, about any of it. As far as he knows, I'm just a regular marketing manager. "Scoping out the territory first?" I asked, immediately understanding his caution. "Something like that. After Chloe, well, I want to be sure this time. I want to meet someone who loves me for who I am, not for what I have." I nodded, feeling a deep understanding. It wasn't exactly the same test I had imposed on the family, but the principle was similar. The search for authenticity, for relationships built on a real foundation, not on material expectations. "What about you?" he asked, swirling the wine in his glass. "It's been a long time since Dad. Have you ever thought about meeting someone?" The question took me by surprise. In 3 years of pretending to be an impoverished widow, and in the subsequent months of rebuilding my life and career, romance had been far from my priorities. "Honestly, no," I replied after a moment. "Arthur was one of a kind. We built so much together, shared so many dreams. It's not easy to imagine that with someone else." "I know Dad would want you to be happy," Ethan said softly. "He always said you were the strongest woman he knew, but also the loneliest before you found him." I felt unexpected tears welling up. "He said that?" "All the time. He told me how you met. You, the brilliant young woman who intimidated all the other computer science students. Him, the only one who had the courage to ask you out for coffee." I smiled at the memory. "He said my intimidation was just a defense mechanism. That inside, I was terrified I wasn't good enough." "And was he right?" "Completely," I admitted. "Your father had that irritating gift of seeing right through people, of seeing who they really were, beyond the masks they wore." Ethan smiled. "Like you with Chloe?" "Not exactly. It took me years to develop that skill, and even then, I was never as good as Arthur. He made it seem natural. For me, it was always a conscious effort." We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought about Arthur, the man who had shaped our lives in such deep and permanent ways. "I'd like you to meet Daniel," Ethan said finally. "Not now, it's still early, but when I'm ready, I think you'll like him." "I'm looking forward to it," I replied sincerely, "and I promise not to request a full dossier on him before dinner." Ethan laughed. "I appreciate that. Although, honestly, after Chloe, maybe a little background check isn't a bad idea." We laughed together, the sound filling the room in a way that made me realize how long it had been since my home, my life, had been filled with real joy. In the following weeks, I dove back into the executive routine with renewed vigor. There was so much to do. New contracts to review, projects to approve, strategic decisions to make. The company was growing at an accelerated pace, and with that came new challenges and opportunities. One afternoon, while reviewing reports in my office, I received a surprising call from Patricia Klein, an old friend who had completely distanced herself after Arthur's death. "Eleanor? It's Patricia. I don't know if you remember me. It's been so long." "Of course I remember you, Patricia," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. I saw the article about you in Forbes. Your return to Apex Solutions. It's impressive. Thank you." Another awkward silence. Then, she took a deep breath. "Look, Eleanor, I'll get straight to the point. I was horrible to you after Arthur died. When you moved into that small apartment, when it seemed like you'd lost everything, I just disappeared. I wasn't a friend. I wasn't even a decent person." I didn't respond, letting her continue. "The truth is, I was scared," she confessed. "Seeing you, always so strong, so successful, seemingly lose everything. It made me realize how fragile my own security was. And instead of helping a friend who was hurting, I pulled away out of pure, selfish fear." "I understand," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, or trying to get back into your life. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, deeply sorry." I reflected for a moment. Patricia had been one of the first to pull away, not with cruelty like Chloe, but with an indifference that, in its own way, had been just as painful. "Thank you for calling, Patricia," I said finally. "It means a lot." "Really?" Her voice sounded hopeful. "Yes, we all make mistakes. We all have moments of weakness. I know I have no right to ask this, but maybe we could get coffee sometime?" I considered the offer. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from another potential disappointment. But another part, perhaps a wiser one, recognized that forgiveness and second chances had to go both ways. "I think I'd like that," I replied. "But on one condition." "What's that?" "Total honesty from now on. No more masks, no more pretense. Just two old friends who have been through a lot and survived to tell the tale." I could hear the smile in her voice. "It's a deal." In the days that followed, I received more similar calls. Old friends, colleagues, and even family members who had distanced themselves during my poverty charade. Some, like Patricia, offered sincere apologies. Others were more cautious, testing the waters to see if I would be receptive to a rapprochement. For each one, I applied the same criterion: honesty. Those who frankly admitted their mistakes, who acknowledged being drawn by my former status and then repelled by the perception of my loss, were given a second chance. Those who tried to rewrite history, who pretended they had never abandoned me, were politely but firmly kept at a distance. Ethan watched this process with interest. "You're rebuilding your social circle," he commented during one of our weekly dinners. Selectively, I corrected, quality over quantity this time. "How's it going with Patricia? Did you have that coffee yet?" I smiled, thinking back on the meetings initially awkward, but gradually evolving into genuine conversations. "It's different now. More real, somehow. Isn't it ironic?" Ethan laughed. "You had to pretend to be poor to find out who your real friends were. And now that everyone knows you're rich, your relationships are more authentic than ever." "Life has those contradictions," I agreed. "Sometimes we need to lose something to truly understand its value." Speaking of value, Ethan hesitated, looking nervous suddenly. I finally told Daniel. "About Apex Solutions, about you, about everything." "And how did he react?" Ethan smiled. He said he suspected there was more to the story. Apparently, despite my best efforts to keep a low profile, he Googled my name and found articles about the company, about you. He was just waiting for me to trust him enough to tell him. "He sounds like a sensible man." "He is." Ethan's face lit up in a way that reminded me of Arthur. "And he wants to meet you. Officially, this time." "I'm looking forward to it," I replied sincerely. The following week, I met Daniel, a tall, slender man with kind eyes and an infectious laugh. He treated Ethan with a respect and affection that was impossible to fake. And most importantly, he treated me not as the intimidating CEO of Apex Solutions or the potential millionaire mother-in-law, but simply as Ethan's mother, Watching the two of them together over dinner, I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't expected. There was an ease to their relationship, a naturalness that Ethan and Chloe never had. They finished each other's sentences, laughed at the same obscure jokes, looked at each other with a kind of mutual admiration that couldn't be faked. "So, Mrs. Pierce," Daniel said as we were having coffee after dinner, "Ethan told me about your social experiment. I have to admit, I was fascinated." "It was controversial, I know," I replied, appreciating his directness. "But effective," he observed. "It showed you who truly cared and who was only interested in what you could offer." "That was the goal," I agreed, though the cost was higher than I expected. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "You know what else intrigued me? How it really confirms something I've always suspected. That most people lead two lives, the public one and the private one." "How so?" "Well, publicly, you were the impoverished widow. Privately, the powerful CEO. Chloe was publicly the perfect wife. Privately, a manipulator. People show the world what they think will be accepted, or admired, or at least tolerated. Few are truly authentic in all aspects of their lives." I glanced at Ethan, who was watching Daniel with open admiration. An insightful observation. It's part of what we study in history, public narratives versus private realities. The great leaders, the famous villains, they all had their official versions and their hidden truths. The conversation continued, flowing easily between topics from history to technology, politics to art. Daniel was articulate without being pretentious, intelligent without being condescending. For the first time in a long time, I felt that sense of recognition that Arthur always described, the gut feeling that this was a good, genuine, trustworthy person. When the evening ended and they were leaving, I hugged Ethan tightly. "He's wonderful," I whispered in his ear. "I know," he replied, happiness evident in his voice. I returned to my penthouse that night with a lighter heart than I had felt in years. Ethan was finding his way in the company, in his personal life, in who he truly wanted to be. Our relationship was stronger, more authentic. Apex Solutions was thriving. Old friendships were being rebuilt on more solid foundations. The charade was over, and in its place, something far more valuable was emerging. A life of honesty. No masks, no tests. Just the truth, in all its complexities.